Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to LIMA Online. This is our second LIMA Online dedicated to the Cultural Matter exhibition with Amalia Ulman's work, Privilege. And as you can all see, she's here again with us. Welcome, Amalia. It's great to have you here. And Jan-Robert Leegte is also here, co-curator of Cultural Matter. And our guest of tonight, the new guest of tonight, is João Laia, curator at Kiasma in Helsinki, Finland. Last week we talked, Amalia talked to Susan Gibb. You talked quite a bit about like privilege and the use of fictional characters. Bob came back quite a lot. I think he's all of our favorites. And I wanted to tell all of you at home that we added the Bob Live film to our Cultural Matter edition page. So if you want to watch it, please go there and check it out. It's definitely worth watching. Jan-Robert, is there anything you'd like to add to this introduction?
No, we'll keep it really short because we're really looking forward to this conversation. Just for the people who weren't here last time, so welcome to our post-corona online editions of Cultural Matter. So we're here purely online. We don't do any physical shows anymore, and the double talks are here online. Sort of semi-replacing the shows is our edition page, which just mentioned, which is like a growing sort of archival page of the streams, which you can watch back afterwards. You can find them at culturalmatter.li-ma.nl. That's where we'll keep the archived edition. There will be the extra information, links to the work, etc. And in the future, we'll start archiving previous editions, starting with Raphael Rosendahl, the previous one, and going back down the line. And of course, we'll be having more Cultural Matter in the future. But enough of that. Yeah,
I'll share the link in the chat. And this is the very same chat that you can, as you probably all know, ask your questions in. You can just post them whenever you want, but we'll leave them for the end so that João and Amalia can talk freely. So yeah, I think it's time to switch to you, and we will do so by a tiny interruption of a trailer that we're going to watch first. And I think this already sets a bit the tone of tonight's talk. It's going to be more cinema related, but that's not up to me. So I'm just going to show the trailer and wish you all a lovely night. Yes, I see that my sound is not working. So I'm gonna, the weird things.
There it is.
No, there it is. I had my tabs muted for the stream, but now it's unmuted.
How do you like it?
I don't know. Yes, it's always raining.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
No luck, no faith, no luck, no faith, no fate.
No luck.
Little interruption, ladies and gentlemen. Good old technical.
Technical problems.
Go get your coffee. Take the muscles, relax the shoulders. Sanneke's onto it.
I just don't manage to get on the sound. I'm gonna give it another shot.
Take the muscles, relax the shoulders.
Good to go.
Sanneke's onto it.
I just don't manage to get on.
How do you like it?
I don't know. It's always raining.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
I'm gonna give it another shot. I
The
think
muscles, relax the shoulders.
No
Just
face,
onto it.
no fate.
Un filtro para fotos. Yo saco lo guapa, ¿eh?
No love,
I'll
no
manage to
face,
get
no
one.
Ahora mira todo lo malo que tenga. Quítame arrugas, manchas, todo.
I don't know. It's always raining.
no fate.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
I'm gonna give it another shot.
The muscles, relax the shoulders. Just onto it.
Un filtro. Yo saco lo guapa, ¿eh? Mira todo lo malo que tenga. Quítame arrugas, manchas, todo.
I don't know. It's always raining.
No fate.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
I'm gonna give it another shot.
The muscles, relax the shoulders. Just onto it.
Un filtro. Yo saco lo guapa, ¿eh?
No luck, no faith.
Mira todo lo malo que tenga. Quítame arrugas, manchas, todo.
I don't know. It's always raining.
No fate.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
I'm gonna give it another shot.
Relax the shoulders.
Un filtro. Yo saco lo guapa, ¿eh?
No luck, no faith.
Quítame arrugas, manchas, todo.
I don't know. It's always raining.
No fate.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
I'm gonna give it another shot.
Relax the shoulders.
What happened?
And that was it.
But wait, am I the only one who heard like everything like in a cumulative way?
No,
all the
I
sound?
heard like doubling of sound also.
Yeah,
But
let's.
it was not even doubling. It was like tripling,
Exactly,
quintuplet
it's
at some
like
point. It
a
was
complete-
crazy.
It was
what
great. I
happened?
loved it.
This was a very bad representation of the trailer. Let's be so everybody knows it's not what it should sound
really-
like.
That's
was
not
weird.
that's not intentional.
And
No,
I didn't know if it was in my stream or in everyone's
No, I
stream.
heard all
but
kinds
yeah,
of loops. So there was
Yeah.
some
It
weird
was so
feedback
weird.
going on.
there was a feedback going on, so probably
So
one of
let's-
us look.
It
Yeah.
would be good to sort of. Could we share the link in the chat so the people?
Yeah, we can share it in the chat, and we can even also put it on the platform,
Exactly,
like
so
on
they
the
can-
edition page, so that you have a real
period.
impression of the trailer. Sorry about that, technical problems, but once again, João and Amalia, thank you so much for being here, and I think we better talk than the screen stuff. So the screen is yours.
Well, let's hope the second extract will be more closer to the original, if not fully the original. But anyways, I think despite the sound effects, let's call it like that, I think it was good to start with the trailer, because also to introduce a little bit what we're going to talk about, it will basically be about the new and the first feature film by Amalia called El Planeta. So because it hasn't been shown anywhere, I guess it was relevant to give this little sample for everyone, so that the conversation has some point of reference or some kind of concreteness. And also, I thought it was funny, Amalia, that you mentioned it was a very straightforward trailer. I don't know if it was the sound effects or if it's the trailer itself, but it didn't feel a very straightforward trailer. Yeah.
It is when it's the sound is okay.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I mean, you get an idea of the film
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you watch this trailer with a proper sound. But yeah, but I mean, as I said before, it's a temporary trailer because the film will be premiered in January, so there won't be the actual trailer won't be done until then.
Sure. So maybe to kick it off, I would like to ask you probably something that people might be considering about already, which is in a way how film or cinema is a sort of 20th century language, and you kind of became so relevant with the digital and so very 20th century, very contemporary use of media. So the question would be, why was it relevant for you at this point to experiment with the media of film?
Yeah, like I wouldn't really use the word experiment. I think it was more like I finally felt that I was ready to make a film, which is something I always wanted to do. I don't know. I love films, and I think most of my inspiration comes from films and books. So everything that I've ever done in the art world has always responded to this idea of narration and chapters and beginnings and ends and storytelling. So for me, it was like a very easy, not even, I wouldn't even say transition, but like a very easy thing to think about, because I already do video works and I've already did things in like the format of movie making, let's say, you know, like a lot of my works, whether they were excellence and perfections or privilege and stuff, they all follow the same structure of script writing, rehearsals, costume, set design, filming, releasing, promoting. And so I kind of like took that and transformed that into a film. I think the reasons why I decided to make maybe a film are not as interesting as like maybe you would want my answer to be. A lot of it has to do with accessibility, being disabled, and also how democratic film is. I do love making sculptural works, site-specific works and things like that, but I feel like only, let's say, people that live in big cities can see these things in person. And also when I started doing these installations, it was during the peak of like post-internet art and all this stuff. And at the time, a lot of people were doing installations only for the photograph to be posted online, right? And then like the installation itself wasn't something very immersive in person. But I wanted to do something very different from that. I wanted to do works that only lived online, like excellences, perfections would be like something that lives online only, and that's like the only place where it functions. The same with privilege, and the same with another like websites or whatever, or apps like Athera. But then that's the main reason why I wanted my installations to be not easy to document and put online. So as something that you needed to be there in person. That's why I introduced sound effects and smells and this and that. And like, the only problem was that I do have myself a physical disability that made it very exhausting to, without the proper funding, to have to travel to all these places, making sure that everything looked right. And it was exhausting. And then like not many people had access to seeing these things in person. Whereas with a film, I can put all that energy of set design into the film, and then people can enjoy it from every part of the world. So that's one of the things that I was interested in. But then it being a very 20th century format, I do have like a strange fetish for like 20th century things. I don't know. But I don't really think about it much. I just made a film because I made a film, and I love the format of, and I love movie making. But there was not like an intentional switch of like, oh, this is less modern than this other thing. Maybe because for me, it's still like it's still very present in my life to watch films and new films that have just been released, or, you know, like it's still like a continuum. It doesn't feel like an old-timey thing to do to watch a film. And at least before COVID, I would often go to the cinema. Like it's like part of my routine is always going to the cinema. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. I guess, I mean, this question from my end was also related, for example, with how the digital really pushed series onto the forefront. Yeah, so I was kind of wondering exactly where your interest came from.
I do have I don't really. I mean, I've been asked many times if I have ideas for TV shows and things like that. But for some reason, my mind doesn't really work that way. So I always have difficulty thinking of things in terms of like episodes that like last forever in a way. I have, I don't know, like when I think about a film that I want to make, I see like every single scene and I see it kind of like form in a way, and that's how I'm able to make it. And I don't see it in episodes, for example, you know? So I do have, I can't really explain why, you know, like what's the reason why, because I do watch shows too, you know, it's not like I'm not aware of the language or anything, but for some reason, I have a difficulty getting there. And the attention span, that's definitely something that I think it's kind of scary, especially not having cinemas right now. Because the one thing that I missed about cinemas, I probably also have a fucked up attention span myself, you know, and I remember it's like last year at the Venice Film Festival, this Tsai Ming Liang film about the closing of a cinema. I can't remember the title.
Goodbye Dragon Inn, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a very slow film, and I love
Right.
Tsai Ming Liang, but that's like
Yeah.
especially slow and dense movie, you know, and you have to watch it at a cinema and nap a little bit and like open your eyes and be forced to, you know, like be there, because it's the kind of thing that if you have it on your computer, you just walk away because you don't have that that experience. And I don't know, I feel like there's many directors whose work I really like. It's not like I think like, oh, it's boring and I'm forced to watch this and I wish I could just walk away. But it's more like I'm grateful that I'm forced to stay here and just look at this, you know, and being forced to absorb this work. So I think that's like a tricky thing right now for filmmakers is like to only think in terms of, fuck, my films are going to only be shown on computers and laptops for the next few years if we're not going to have proper cinemas, you know. And that's like a whole different I don't know, audience that you're reaching, you know, like people who are extremely distracted.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, that
yeah.
experience of time, experiencing time as such that cinema might allow, it's very connected with also the spatial configuration in the dark room and the big space, definitely.
Yeah.
So yeah, quite particular to cinema, and again, maybe to a bygone time. I hope not. I'm also quite an enthusiast and lover of cinema, but yeah, let's see. Maybe I would also, in connection to this question, just briefly ask if the fact that you lived in LA, and LA is the iconic cinema city, both in terms of how it's portrayed, but also in the way that all the studios or the big studios of Western cinema production are there. Did that period there influence your either your like interest in making film? Probably not, because you mentioned it was already very present since before, but did it impact in any way the way you look at film or think about film, or even the way you made your film?
Well, I think being in LA, it was not inspiring movie-wise, especially because my inspiration has always came from European cinema or Asian cinema, Chinese cinema. So whatever was getting made in Los Angeles, I was not that into that. But I think LA as a city was interesting in like a very indirect way, maybe. Just to know like the reality, it's like a propaganda machine, you know, it's like you're living in a place that doesn't look at all like the movies of it or the representation of it or the idea that people have of Los Angeles in their mind, right? I live in the real LA, I lived in Koreatown, and I live very close to MacArthur Park, and I would go to downtown LA. So that was my life, was Koreatown, MacArthur, downtown, and with all that entails. And there's only one movie that I watched recently that's called Gemini that was set in Koreatown, and that felt like, oh, that's my LA. That's for the first time that I see that LA in movies. But otherwise, it's like a very strange reality. And I think that's what I found fascinating about being there at the time, is that, I don't know, being in London and the taxi driver asks you like, oh, where do you live? Oh, I live in Los Angeles. Oh, so lucky. Oh, the swimming pools, this and that. You're like, oh, I don't live like the Kardashians, like that's or like that's a very different part of LA. And I think the most shocking experience of Los Angeles that I ever had was not when I was living there, but when I visited with my parents when I was 8. It was a big trip because we didn't have money, so like we travel every 5 years or something. So this was like our epic 1 week trip to Los Angeles or something. And I remember we went to Hollywood Boulevard, and it was so gross, it was so dirty, it was so dusty, it looked so bad. And I think that was the most shocking experience for me. It's like, wait, this is Hollywood. This is Hollywood? It looks awful. And I would always, when living there, I would always be around that area and look at the tourists and think they're probably going through the same I went through that time, where like they came all the way from all parts of the world to say, this is Hollywood? It looks terrible. And there's all these homeless people laying around, and there's like all these stores, like all the buildings are made of papier mache, And so I think that's my inspiration from LA was always how much of a set it was,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but not like literally like on the film thing, but like more like the history of it being like a fake place.
Okay. Yeah, so a kind of reactive, non-direct influence, I guess. And still,
sorry, I forgot to say, I do have like a big interest in very early cinema in Hollywood, and like all the things that happened, and all the European directors that went to Hollywood, the ones that were able to adapt and the ones who weren't. But the problem is that when you're in LA, none of those things are there, because all of those buildings have been turned down, all of that stuff. There's only photos in book, and you can just only go to those streets and look at it and be like, okay, now here's a Rite Aid, but I have to imagine that here. So you can't really feel that when you're there, because all of that is very gone. So even if you're interested in it, it's hard to feel it or see it or anything. Sorry.
No, thanks for that. Continuing like the line of talking about spaces or cities, now maybe let's cross over to the other side of the Atlantic, talking about Gijón. For those who haven't seen the film, the whole film is set and shot in Gijón, which is a city where you lived for quite a while. And I would like to ask, why did you decide to set the film there? And this because, I mean, of course it provides a context, but in terms of the actual narrative, it could easily have happened in another place, in another city. So yeah, could you tell us why did you pick Gijón?
I picked Gijón because it's for me at least, it's a very special place. I mean, I grew up there, but it's a place that I have this love-hate relationship with, and it's full of very bizarre characters because it's a small town, and Asturias is like a mountain province. So for centuries, it never had too much access to the rest of Spain, because like all these villages are very isolated because of it's hard to get to them. So as a place, it's like a very strange place. And for me, and I've always brought a lot of my friends to visit the town, and they're also fascinated by the amount of strange characters, the strange graphic design, the way people do the displays in for window shopping. All that stuff is like almost stuck in time and like very sweetly provincial and weird. And I don't know, I wanted to show that. I also made a book about the making of the film, and I invited a few writers and photographers to the city, and they all felt the same way when they got to the city. It's like a strange place. People dress up a lot to go for walks. The population is extremely old. And I guess being my first film and not having much budget, shooting in your own town is the way to go, because I know every single corner, you know. So for me to know the plan, the shots, the photography, everything, I knew specifically each corner that I wanted to shoot. I don't know, it just felt natural to do my first film there, out of love for the city, but also knowing the city very well. Yeah, but I guess the thing is, like, when you're European, there's a lot of towns that also resemble Gijón, you know, like all these small towns that also have their own idiosincrasia, like this strange way of being. And yeah, this is why the character of the guy in the Chinese story is based on a friend of mine who, he's Chinese but grew up in Portugal. And actually we understand each other very well because our cities are kind of similar, you know. For him, as an immigrant growing up in Porto, is, you know, you get a lot of similar feelings to like me being an immigrant growing up in Gijón, which is like also like a weird town in the middle of nowhere where like so I think there's a lot of connections between all these little European cities. So yeah, I think maybe it's not as special for other Europeans, but I think for me, I have a soft spot for it.
Cool, thank you. Just to follow up, not sure if it's a question, let's see if it triggers something in you, but the way also you treat the city, or the way at least the city is kind of represented or functions as a backdrop, has this kind of eeriness of being kind of being timeless. Maybe you can't really, or at least I wasn't able to locate it very specifically in time, because clearly the socio-political kind of context is of a crisis, ongoing crisis. So of course, for me being from the peninsula and having lived in Spain, I kind of associated immediately to the crisis of the late 2000s, early 2010s. But I was also aware that the film had been shot very recently. So I was kind of wondering if you focus specifically, you mentioned there's a lot of elderly people, which is another kind of time marker, I guess, in the film. Of course, the color or the lack of color that you used to employ also adds a kind of timelessness. But I was kind of wondering if that approach was something that you specifically had in mind and kind of imposed onto the city, or was more the city kind of offering you that platform?
Well, I think it's both, you know, both ways. I was interested in portraying that side of the city because the movie is about these women about to get evicted, right? So the economic crisis is a big deal in the film. Like, it is something that is surrounding the characters. All the stores are closed. There's very little opportunities. There's a lot of unemployment. So that all of that makes sense for the story to happen. You know, these women are committing these petty crimes because of that. You know, if there was a chance that they could get a job, they would take it, but it just doesn't exist. So I think that sense of claustrophobia adds to the film and to the character of Leo wanting to go back to London, for example. You know, she feels extremely trapped. And but definitely Gijón and many other smaller towns in Spain, since the crisis, they have gotten stuck. Like they're never gotten better or back to how it was in the 2000s. That being said, Gijón, since I arrived as a baby in the 90s, it was always a very poor, working class, stagnant, cold place where like the weather is terrible. And you know, for some reason it's always been very cultural too. We had like a huge movement of indie music in the 90s, and we had a really good film festival, a lot of exhibitions, etc., etc. That but it's also been like a very strange place, you know, that is trapped by the mountains and has very little mobility. there's a place that is even weirder, that is Oviedo, that is at the end of the movie, that is the idea capital of Asturias, that is more weird because it's a right-winger capital and it emulates Vienna a lot, and everything's sort of stuck in 80s aesthetic, like almost like Vienna, you know, it's like either Baroque or 80s. And all these things I find very appealing. And if you watch the film, you see like a lot of old stores from Gijón for old people. They keep the decorations and the designs and everything is from like the 70s. So there's like all these from different generations, there's like all this stuff that got stuck in time, you know. And I feel like in Gijón right now, like in many other places in Europe, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be ruins of the flourishing 2000s, like these decorations or whatever, interior designs and everything is just going to get stuck like that for a long time, which is going to be a bit strange and weird for the next decade, let's say, you know.
Thank you.
I've always been interested in that.
Yeah, we can discuss that as well. Your interest in like the way shops are kind of staged and repetitive patterns. I don't know if that's something you want to address, because indeed shop windows are recurrent throughout the whole film, both in terms of what they show inside, but also what they reflect from the outside, in this kind of juxtaposition between the two, and the movements that are reflected and refracted from those kinds of screens. I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Well, it's kind of reminiscent of what I said last week about other works like Bayer Walker Rover. The first Bayer Walker Rover is pretty much set in Gijón as well. And it's all about wandering around and going to malls and going to stores. And so a big part of my work is a collage of ready-mades, you know. So as I said to you yesterday, I didn't want to compartmentalize and have like a film and then my art practice, and instead the film incorporates all of these aspects of my art practice. And there's a lot of mentions. A lot of the characters are just wandering around and like looking at things that they can't afford and like just wasting time because there's nothing else to do, and in a way like trying to keep up their appearances and all these things. And so yeah, I definitely try to incorporate things that are mentioned in the video essays and things like that into the film, and all those aesthetics are like apparent in the movie, you know, like when the character of Leo is crying and then suddenly we cut to that little towel that is like from a Chinese store with like a very silly design, you know, that adds this comedic effect to the scene. There's like all these little elements that are pretty much taken from my art practice and placed into the film in very subtle ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's plenty of your previous work. I mean, not to say that the film is a summary of what you've done before. I don't think it is. I think it's really a huge step forward. But there are various markers and traces of previous work you've done in the past, and maybe using this, I think it's a good point to show the extract of Sordid Scandal.
Okay.
Would you like to just introduce a little bit what Sordid Scandal is?
Yeah, I think we talked last week about some of these video essays, PowerPoint presentations. I've done a trilogy of them, and also whenever I finish a large body of work and I get invited to give a talk about it or something, I usually make a presentation of this kind to explain sort of the background story of the work, not so much the work itself, but like more the atmosphere, or you know, like what drove me to make it. And in this case, this is a PowerPoint about the making of the film commissioned by the Tate Modern. And yeah, it's pretty much the whole story behind making the film, like how the film is based on these two real scammers from my city, but how also, you know, in one point I said like how my fictional self from Excellence and Perfections have swallowed the living and breathing me, because those viral articles online made me lose my home and render my mom homeless. So like all those elements are real in the film. Like all these two women that are about to get evicted is based on a real experience that we were using for creative purposes. So yeah, like that's sort of like an explanation of it. This is a PowerPoint about all the background story of making the film. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe now we play it and then we come back.
Let's hope it works.
Those trapped by their circumstances and unable to be part of the discourse due to class, race, or disability. Pretty much like claiming tea is your thing when you already know it is a thing somewhere else. So what I would say is that everything started with this image of a mother-daughter scammer duo infamous for the petty crimes they committed in Gijón, the city where I grew up.
Son madre e hija y podrían haber robado hasta 6.000 euros en restaurantes o establecimientos de comida como este, en Lugones.
Bocadillos de carne guisada, bocadillos de tortilla rellena. La verdad que ellas daban el pego, pero muy bien, muy bien, muy bien.
El juicio contra Justina y su hija Ana Belén, acusadas de estafar 5.600 euros en 3 restaurantes y una tienda de niños de Gijón, se suspende ante la negativa de su abogado a defenderlas. Se hacían pasar por mujeres adineradas y conseguían convencer a los responsables de que pagarían las facturas aludiendo a su buena posición. La hija incluso aseguraba tener un romance con el ahora candidato socialista a la alcaldía de Gijón, José María Pérez. Ponían como excusa que tenían la casa de Somio en obras para comer y cenar a diario en los restaurantes. Sin embargo, las acusadas tenían su residencia en un modesto piso del llano, y la realidad es que no tenían ni luz para cocinar.
My work has often referred to the topics of appearance and class, so it all made sense. But unconsciously, the film was more of an outlet for the putrefied bile I had been bottling up since my father committed fraud using my signature, and my mother and I lost our home against the bank because of it. As a child, I lived in a small apartment in Gijón, the working-class socialist counterpart to Oviedo, a coastal town sprinkled with abstract public sculptures. My serenely gloomy existence of school and running wild in the streets was only ever interrupted to go and pay our landlord in cash. Angela and Lola were what you would call good landlords. They owned a bunch of property because they had won the lottery, which is an euphemism for engaging in prostitution and smuggling condoms during the Franco dictatorship. They never had kids, so they were very nice to me. Every time we visited, Lola would give me a tiny toy from her vast collection of plastic Disney figurines. A few years later, struck by Alzheimer's, Lola was under the care of Catholic nuns who tried to convince her to donate her home to the church. After some weeks of uncertainty, we learned that my name, not the church, had ended up in her will. And that was it. The only explanation my father ever gave me at the time was that outsiders, them, had helped outsiders, us, and that's how I owned property when I was 10. Many years later, out of college and out of London, I was back in Gijón unemployed and living with my mother during the peak of Spain's financial rock bottom. My ex in London had said that he was never, ever going to talk to me again, but he had to break his silence because his mother, a talented painter and an accurate medium, had received a message from a woman named Dolores. She had told her to contact me, to tell me to be careful, and that there was something of value in the house, right where the wall goes inwards and it sounds hollow. Who's Dolores? That's Lola, my mom said. And that's when I learned Lola was a divinity for Dolores and realized that Lola's Flores is actually Dolores Flores, which rhymes. We were shaking in fear and excitement. What if there was a stash of money hidden inside the wall, or jewels? We dreamed of hot meals and new clothes while following the ghost instructions. And there was a spot that sounded hollow, right where a nook embraced our gas heater perfectly. We grabbed a hammer and hoped for the best. Instantly, a perfect hole. Inside the hole, a dead bird. A small little blackened sparrow lying perfectly on its back with its legs up. We shrugged and laughed at our pathetic luck. We were still broke, and now we had to fix the wall too.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, I find it quite amazing, really, here, but elsewhere in other kind of these performative lectures or moving image pieces. I don't know exactly how you prefer to discuss them, but in any case, how in this specific extract, but again, it happened elsewhere, how you depart from facts, so like from news actually, and news about the kind of stage situation, but still news. And then so quickly you end up in this story about medium and, you know, breaking a hole in the wall to find some sort of treasure. It's so entertaining. And this to come back to El Planeta, that also you managed to build a really entertaining piece out of very real and not so maybe pleasureful circumstances. But yeah, to connect both, because they might seem quite detached, at least formally they are quite detached, but it's as this piece kind of articulates, El Planeta has a huge constellation or a huge network of events, of stories that you kind of blend together. And I wanted to ask, like, do you think that's something that cinema as a medium allows you to do? Is that what for you, like, cinema adds to what you were doing before? Or is just more related what you mentioned in the beginning in terms of being more democratic, in terms of access and opening up more the audience for your work?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I think everything goes back to what I said of the idea of the ready-made, and how everything that I ever made is sort of a collage of something that is real, to the point where, like, it becomes fiction because it's being put together with something else. Again, I usually bring this back to the fact that I'm autistic, and the way I would say people always say, like, oh, that's not true. But the way I see it is like, I don't have a lot of imagination the way neurotypical people would have imagination. So the way I've always done things is not like from zero, like I don't create these magical fantasy lands with like for me has always been about ready-mades and collage, and put all of these things together until they become unrecognizable and like absolutely fiction. But yeah, like everything in the PowerPoint is real, but interwoven together in a way that becomes like a fictional narrative. And the same with the film, like all the experience, all the scenes in the film are based on something that actually happened, if not to me, to a friend, to like a neighbor, to but all of that is woven in a way that it becomes fiction, you know, it's not true anymore. And I've always worked like that. And I think that, yes, film allows me to seamlessly, which I feel like in the art world sometimes it's like, oh, it's either painting or sculpture or this or, you know, or net art or whatever. But in the film, I can like very easily like plays the music, plays the narrative, change like things, and not in this movie itself that I made, but like other filmmakers are able to include animations or things that are like from different medias, but like in a way that you even don't even see it because it's so well made. So yeah, I definitely think that film is something that allows me to do that, to put all these things together into one big work.
Yeah, connection.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. In connection to that, what you mentioned of taking real bits or snippets of stories and blend them together to make a fiction. Yeah, I would like you to talk a little bit about your own role because it's quite complex.
Mm.
You're both the director and the actor, sure, but then you're also like, you use yourself as a reference to the stories, and you also use your mom as another actress. So, you know, there's many things going on, real and staged. So yeah, could you discuss that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so my character is a composite. Is definitely not me, the character that I play, but it's definitely something. Is someone based on my experiences, but also people around me, and sort of an example of how not to be in a way, or ways that I've been trying to avoid to be. You know, like to getting. To have too much FOMO, to get stuck with this idea that you have to be in a big city to succeed, or like, etc., etc. But at the same time, I feel like I'm allowed to say that to myself because I was able to live abroad and stuff because I had the opportunity. But I know of a lot of people from my own city that, I don't know, went to London for a year and very fast had to come back and like have been trying to go back to the big city for ever. You know, and it's that feeling of a stagnation that I wanted to put in this character. But also a lot of things that had happened to me and a lot of friends, which is like, you know, you're completely broke and they give you this big opportunity in the movies to style Christina Aguilera for the cover of the magazine because the girl is a stylist. But there's no budget at all. And then you're like, oh, you're stuck in this shithole in the middle of nowhere and you have this big opportunity, but it has no money. So you know, it's like that feeling that a lot of my friends have been going through, you know, because I don't know, with programs like 89 plus and things like that, were like big things were happening and involving people from all over the world, but giving the same opportunities or the same lack of opportunities to people with rich families and people that were struggling to even stay to eat, you know. And like putting all together in the same basket with the pretense of equality, that is very stressful, you know, because a lot of these opportunities, a lot of rich kids were able to just grab and take and fly and do things and put their own money, ask their parents for money, whereas other people were like, okay, I have to pretend in front of all these rich people that my life is okay, you know, and that all these conditions, all these shitty working conditions are okay with me. And like, so I think that character is a composite of all of these things that I've been seeing around for the past decade, let's say, you know, like that period of time where like all these things were going around, like big opportunities. And like when exposure was a thing, I feel like people have falling out of love with that, you know, idea of like, oh, it's enough to have exposure. A lot of people are like being more vocal about complaining about this, you know, and like how you need to get paid for things because you need to pay rent and eat and everything. But yeah, so all of those details were based on things that happened to me and friends and stuff. And she's not an artist, she's a stylist, but that's because I went to St. Martin's. So I had a lot of friends that were in the fashion department and I know how they work and I know, you know, and a lot of the clothes in the movie are by New York young designers. So I was just kind of looking at these new trends in New York for all these stylists and designers and everything. And then the same with the mother. The mother is definitely a character. My mom doesn't dress like that, or you know, she doesn't do the things that character does, but we definitely recycled things that we've been through or like fights that we'd had together, like the electricity fight in the movie. That was a very hard scene to do, but at the end, you know, I was like, well, let's really fight the way we fought a few times in the past, you know, even if it's ugly. So there's this idea of refurbishing stories that are real or emotions that are real with like costumes and like things that happen to other people as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to pick up, sorry, I want to pick up on politics that you mentioned now, but I guess I would say it's a super key layer of your work, which might not always be as underlined as it should, I guess, in many readings of your work. But I would say there's a huge interest of yours to discuss politics via power or money or whatever. And I would like to ask you, like, how do you see again, not to be too obsessed about the format of cinema or feature film, but I am interested in knowing what's your take on it. Like, what do you think is the political agency or the specificity in terms of articulation of some sort of political agency of feature film or cinema in general, and of narration as a tool?
Well, I think it's huge, and that's why the USA had been able to have such a cultural hegemony through the whole world is through the machine that is Hollywood. It's like a propaganda machine, and I mean, everyone here is European, but like you grew up watching American films, and and it's like almost second nature to know about New York and know, it's like you know these things. You wouldn't know about. Americans do not know about, I don't know, a movie set somewhere in Hungary, like that. You don't know about that. So I think that it's definitely like a huge propaganda tool. But when it comes to not responding to a specific like nationalistic agenda, I think film and fiction in general, books, fictional stories as well, do this. They generate this empathy. So when you're trying to talk about certain topics, like in this case, it's like these two women are about to get evicted, right? And they go through all these different things. Being able to watch this film and it being almost like a comedy and you being able to laugh at certain things or even, liking the characters, it makes you have this empathy for that situation and understanding a lot of things that maybe reading an article or like a dry theory book wouldn't get you anywhere, So I think cinema does have that power of introducing new things for people to understand. And one of the things that it's included in the film, for example, is the disability that Leo has, that is the disability that I have. And it's not overly dramatic or anything. It's just something that you see she's dealing with. And that all the time, just like, oh, I'm in pain, therefore I have to like stop here and do this other thing. Or it's mentioned throughout the film, and the same way, like, the dynamics between her and like the potential client or sugar daddy at the beginning. And you can see that she's not a lazy person, that she's not doing that because she doesn't want to work or anything, it's doing that because there's like no other options around. I don't know, I think there's like cinema always gives you this possibility of immerse yourself in the reality of someone else and understanding, and then it's like you get to live their lives for a little bit. So I think it's very powerful politically, for good and bad.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that answer. And I think we should kind of not wrap it up, but open the floor. So I'm just going to ask another question, and then maybe we can open to other questions from the audience, or if not, I can continue also. But the last question at this point would be about the title, which might sound a bit detached from the story or the stories. So the title is The Planet, El Planeta. Could you kind of unravel exactly what you mean with titling the film like this?
Well, El Planeta, it's the name of the restaurant that they go to do one of the scams.
Okay.
The first one where they go up the hill and go, that restaurant is called El Planeta, and that's literally like in the corner of where I grew up,
Okay.
And it's a very famous restaurant. But also,
and it's the one that the daughter wasn't aware of the scam, right? It's that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So El Planeta is a restaurant But also, I thought it was a great title because if you very mildly throughout the movie, also climate change is mentioned because it's too hot for being October, and they often leave the house wearing a coat and have to go back.
Yeah.
And then they mention sometimes like, oh, it's so hot. Like, why is it so hot? But so the idea of the film named El Planeta is this idea of like these two women have all these dramas going on, right? It's like their life is falling into pieces. There's all these things going on. But at the end of the day, it's like such a small thing in comparison, you know, to like what's happening that they don't have any control over. So I always like that title to put it like their drama into perspective in a way, you know. It's like they're not aware that there's like a bigger, I mean, in this case, you could say like, oh, the pandemic happened like 3 months after we were shooting the film or something, you know. But it's kind of like that idea of like all these petty dramas between them, and then like there's this thing looming over that is much more dangerous that they're not even aware of. So yeah, that's why I always like the title Planeta, the planet.
Great. Yeah, so maybe let's hear.
Yeah, I had a look at the chat. There's no activity yet, so
Okay.
The ones out there, please ask your questions.
Sure.
But for now, you can continue.
Sure. Also, if you or Jan would like to ask something, I don't want to be like monopolizing. I have more questions, so it's totally fine, but just opening up also for you guys.
Thanks. Yeah.
No. Okay. So I would like to ask Amalia about acting. Again, going back a little bit of this multiplication of roles, but now from a production standpoint. So you were director and you were an actor. And I mean, again, previously you already played or flirted with acting. But here, I mean, it's a feature film. You're really acting, and you're basically the main character. So there's a lot of acting and amazing acting, at least from my perspective. So I would like to ask you about that a little bit, how it was for you, how different it was, and about the back context, I guess, of your acting skills.
Right. So it's all very complicated and still like a work in progress. I feel like I always had an interest in it that I never allowed for it to be out in the open. I think the first time that I ever dared to do something like that with excellences, and I was terrified. But secretly and privately, growing up, as soon as I was home alone, I would put wigs on and I know by heart all the songs and choreographies to the movie Cabaret and things like that. So I was like a theater kid that didn't have the outlet of being a theater kid, because in Spain we don't have that. Also, I guess, I've always been interested. I always loved doing it. I never took myself seriously, also because of representation in Spain. You either from Madrid or you're not going to be in the movies, you know. As someone from Asturias, I didn't see myself. Also, I didn't feel like I fitted the profile of how people looked in. I'm not blonde. I don't know. Everyone on TV is blonde in Latin America and in Spain. So I never thought myself fit to take that role, you know. So I never took that seriously. Then after Excellences, I was always very, I mean, hurt is a big word. It's like, oh, I'm hurt by, but I was always upset that people would say that I sneaked into hotels to take the photos, and that everyone would always bring Cindy Sherman. And I was like, but I didn't stage the photos. And for me, like a big part of all those works and how lively the photos might look is because they're just a documentation of an actual performance. Because I would be doing method acting in the meantime for a long time, and then a photo would happen instead of staging a photo, right? So that for me was always like, I want people to know that the background of all, like the acting is a very important part of all these works. And I started having more and more interest in method acting because that was literally what I was doing without the knowledge. Like the way I would work was pretty much the same structure that you follow in method acting. So then I went to a place in Los Angeles with this teacher who is a direct disciple of Lee Strasberg, and it's like a super hardcore class. He's evil, like the teacher in Whiplash, like he'll ruin your life. It was really stressful and hard, and like he like can humiliate you forever if he wants to. And yeah, like he was a teacher of Philip Seymour Hoffman and very serious people, and I think that was a big shift to have that knowledge and like to have that respect for the craft of acting, which I feel like in the arts is always like a pathetic thing to be an actress, you know, like as an artist that I wanted to be serious when I came out of college or whatever. You don't want to be an actress. At least back then it was a no-no, you know, to be an actor. Like it's not serious because people didn't take theater seriously, and theater and fine arts were completely detached. Like I had no friends whatsoever that were interested in doing anything. And the performance artists that did things live were lame. They were not like the cool artists. I don't know, like when I came out of college, that was sort of how it felt, you know, and it was not around me. I feel like now I have a bunch of friends that are connected to the art world that are taking acting lessons and are taking the craft of acting seriously, and not almost like as an ironic thing that you're doing, but like as something that could be connected to the arts, you know? So I guess that was a big change to take that seriously, because I wanted to give my all for the film. I don't know, and so did my mother. But yeah, it was a lot of training.
Yeah, I must do the public mea culpa. I was one of the several probably that mention Cindy Sherman's reference, specifically the film stills. And I was thinking a lot about it actually. And I agree absolutely in the difference, but still, and not to be
Oh no, of course. I mean,
insistent.
and I like her work, and I think the photography aspect of it, I mean, it's like a very easy, but I feel like it's not,
I guess the
you know, like not seeing the back.
that are being discussed overlap quite a lot. The idea of power and staging and the female condition. And then in terms of the process, I also think they share a lot in the sense that they are contemporary to the time of their production. I think the way you approach the making of those images and that kind of extended performance, let's say, that then picks a moment to be crystallized, in a way it echoes more the kind of blurred boundaries of contemporary life, where things, labor and pleasure and real and not real, are not so easily defined. And maybe at the point of production of Cindy Sherman's work, the staging was very clear and the out of the frame was also clearer. So despite that, I still think there is an interesting dialogue and not silencing all the differences.
No, of course. I think there's definitely like a lot of things in common, but I feel like, I mean, some people just say that excellence is just self-feminism, that there was no planning behind it, that it was just me looking hot, claiming like, you know, like, but that's something I have to deal with as soon as it's a woman and a photograph, you know, like it gets flattened out very fast. You know, it's like, this is what it is. This is,
But
so
in a way,
sometimes
it
it's
tells
hard
more
because you're
about
trying
the
to find-
person who's actually expressing that comment than about what's there.
Oh no, of course, yeah. But that's like a common thing, and I feel like by making the film, I'm also stepping away from a lot of that because I'm showing that the process is something more complicated than that, more complex than that. But yeah, I mean, I told you yesterday that I'm also I did this workshop where I was an acting coach, and we added as the last step of all the acting exercises, the performing online and creating a fictional profiles on social media, talking to people in character, etc., as part of the costume of the characters, and sort of expanding from like the classic elements that would help you build a character with whatever one does online. And so, I mean, I have a long-standing interest in performance, and also as I said, I'm autistic, and in women, the way it gets manifested is that women with autism pass as normal more easier, and they don't get diagnosed when they're little because they are very good at masking and scripting. So I've always, and I'm still wanting to like work with someone from, let's say, the Welcome Collection in London or something, because there's a lot of very similar structures from coping mechanisms that women with autism do that reflect the exact same process of method acting. So I have an interest in like studying more about all these things, because I think it would be very helpful for a lot of people that have autism to take acting lessons professionally and like things like that, and like as part of therapy in a way, you know, like even if someone is not interested in pursuing that professionally. But yeah, I don't know.
Not sure if there are any questions at this point.
Still not.
No?
I'm
That's
even
all right.
surprised by it. But yeah, maybe Robert and I can also jump in the conversation, which is always nice to end it in a more a group session.
Sounds great.
And now that we talked of cinema quite a bit, I wanted to bring back my reference that I brought up, like in regard to privilege, and even that Robert brought up. And even like after the talk with Susan, I thought, so just for all of you to know, that we can't help thinking of David Lynch all the time when we see the aesthetic, but maybe also because there was excellences and perfections where you were blonde and then you were a brunette, and also this playing with the manifestation of the woman, like, is she the same, is she someone else, and this very theatrical black and white and red. So there's a super, for me there was a Lynchian atmosphere. So yeah, maybe more in the looks than in the concept when we talked of it. And of course there was Bob, but yeah, I couldn't help it. This mysterious character. But this was like not a cinematographic project, but with an obvious like cinematic tendency to it. And now your film maybe has that obvious cinematic references a bit less. Like I don't know. I was just intrigued by how you switch from medium and look.
It does have references, but I don't think anyone, unless it's like an extreme movie buff, would get the references, because I mean, a lot of the inspiration for the film, there's a lot of contemporary filmmakers, there's Hong Sang-soo, there's a lot of people are making films now, but a lot of the inspiration as well was Ernst Lubitsch and things like Renoir's Rules of the Game and early pre-code movies, Hollywood pre-code movies. There's a song that I'm singing in a window while I'm smoking, which is like a pre-code era song from a film. There's a part where I'm saying goodbye to somebody, and the script is directly taken from Ernst Lubitsch's film. So there's a lot of different references. The music at the Chinese store references one of my favorite Chinese films, Comrade's a Love Story. It's a Teresa Teng song. So there's like a lot of things there that are references. And but not very obvious references unless you like maybe all the movies or something. Like very obscure. They're not very obvious, but there's definitely a lot of things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, of course, and I like.
But again, because the film is so contemporary, like also it's hard to see those silent movie or like Ernst Lubitz references, because the tone and everything feels very contemporary, so it's kind of gets lost in it, in how contemporary the film is. It's hard to get those references. But I mean, people always mention Almodovar, but I think that's only because it's such a Almodovar, he just makes Spanish films. That's Spain, you know. Like what he does is like that's Spain, especially their early films. People would think, oh, that's his signature style. No, that's Spain. People are crazy. All those ladies are crazy. All those neighbors that kill their husbands. All that stuff, that's there, and that's he's not exaggerating. So I feel like when people say that, it's also like, yeah, it's like a mother-daughter, like Almodovar, in a way that it's like, yeah, it's like a very like trashy Spanish story, and that's the connection to it. But there's a lot of little references, like for example, the main inspiration that I gave to the musician that made the soundtrack, Chicken, were the songs that Federico García Lorca made with La Argentinita, so there's like a bunch of very Spanish references that I think come from being foreign, because I don't think a Spanish person would be so much into bringing Spanish references into something like this, like Castañuela sounds and things like that. But yeah, there is a lot of movie referencing, which I like about movies, I think, is that you can reference other films without copying them, like as a homage more than appropriating or copying or something. Yeah, and I like that.
That's cool. Yeah, no, it does encourage us to watch it even closer to, and I think that's also that actually maybe is a similar thing in your Privilege and your film, that there's this you want to look close, you want to unravel like it, and that's maybe also putting in some references. It's something that you like on the surface maybe not see, but there's always something like a hidden message here and there. But did you also do it the other way around, actually, that there's like, since there's cinematography in your art project and that there's also art references, or did you bring things from the art world and from your way of having worked in previous art projects into the movie?
There's a lot of references. There's art feature in the film that friends gave me as a way to decorating the character's room and things like that, and mostly in the format of clothing maybe, but like there's a lot of the references to like the art wall around me. There's a poster by David Horvitz that he donated for the film in the room of Leo. There's a lot of things like that, but maybe not as much as film references. I think there's not that many, especially because the character is a fashion stylist, so there's more references to fashion than there is to fine arts maybe.
But for example, formally, there's a sort of self-quote, you quoting yourself on the transitions. That really echoes your lecture performance, Moving Image, for example.
Yes, so for example, going back to this idea of the ready-made, there is these transitions in the movie that, cut between scenes that like are in Premiere. We use Premiere to edit the film, and they are sort of are very similar to the transitions in my PowerPoint presentations, because it's like the ones that are like in the software that no one uses, like like X fades and like maybe like the leaf moving or whatever. Those are definitely references, not to art world in general, but to my art practice.
Which they appeared in the trailer also. It was maybe too fast, but present in the trailer.
And there's, some other references, like when the mother is like, oh, she has a lot of followers on Instagram, like things like that, or like, like there's like a lot of like little references, but not very direct.
our YouTube audience is.
I guess I just have to watch the film to have any
Yeah,
sort of question.
yeah,
I think
probably.
I was thinking about, like, if you haven't seen it, maybe indeed it's a bit hard, and which is
Yeah.
something I wanted to ask you also, like, when can we see it? Like, yeah, I know.
Well, the premiere will be end of January. I can't say where yet, but it will be in January, and I think the festival will be online, like most festivals nowadays. So probably it'll be available for anyone in any part of the world to buy a ticket and watch the film. So yeah, it'll be ready very soon. Otherwise, I invite everyone to watch Sordid Scandal and get a sort of idea of the gist of it and how it got made and everything.
Yeah, I can really encourage everyone to watch it. It's super interesting, and I don't know what it is, but my chat is not working. I wanted to place all the links in the YouTube chat, but it doesn't work. Robert also didn't manage, I think. So we'll place it all on the edition page that everyone can browse around and watch all the amazing stuff that we talked of. But we have to wait for another couple of months for the movie. But I think everyone is really dying to see it now, since like so many things has been said about it.
So very excited to show it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, Jan, no, please.
Oh, no. I was, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking maybe we can start wrapping it up, and I have a kind of wrap-up question, which is about the future, which Sanneke was already kind of hinting at.
Give me 1 second.
I think the future freaks her out.
No, just, I mean, let's wait a little bit for Amalia to come back.
In the meantime, Sanneke, would it be
Amalia's back.
Yeah, after we wrap it up, that we do another attempt at showing the trailer? You think?
Yeah, that could be nice.
Oh, we can do that. Yeah, I think now, like, we get.
Oh, if we can end with that, and then we can end with the trailer for the audience, that would be.
I think it.
Oh, that's actually a good idea. I'm gonna already like.
Good.
So yeah, wrap-up question, Amalia's future.
The future.
I mean, it was interesting now that El Planeta is not out, but it's on the way to be out, and you released Sordid Scandal as a kind of parallel object. So my question would be, for the future, are you considering to make more films? And if that is something you're considering, how does your kind of white cube practice sit? Are you going to focus on either? Are you going to continue with both, as it kind of sounds would be natural, in the sense that you don't compartmentalize practices? Yeah, just like open futuristic question.
So yeah, I mean, I'm already working on my second feature film, and it's kind of like going back to that question that you said about the power of the politics of film. I think the next film will be not the story itself, because it's going to be like a rom-com in a way, like that's the format, but it's going to talk about a lot of very unspoken important things that I want to shoot it in Argentina. Is going to tackle a lot of extremely dark topics that people that try to talk about them get killed for. So in a way, it'll be very political, but not being a political story. It's just like it's set in like a place where things are happening. They're very dark. It tackles a lot of things. It'll tackle racial struggles in Argentina with people, indigenous people from the north, and it'll also tackle the pollution that all of these first world countries are doing, you know, all these things that they're doing in the third world. And yeah, so it's gonna be, I want to make it very, in a way, easy on the eye, despite the topic. It's gonna be a very hard topic, but at the same time, I want to work with a comedic writer and make something that people will want to see and later have a stronger empathy with certain things. The film will also deal a lot with people with disabilities. So I want to give exposure to that too. And then when it comes to the white cube, I think I've always been very narrative in my work. So I think having this outlet where I'm actually making films and working on scripts will allow me to have more freedom, to be more abstract when it comes to art, or like just use their space of fine arts to do the things that I cannot do anywhere else. And I'm very excited to keep on pursuing that, especially when it comes to method acting, or maybe like more unorthodox ways of expanding that. Right now I'm working on these wall pieces that are about the way the fictional characters that I've made write, was their handwriting. So yeah, I'm interested in keeping both, because they can feed into each other, but there's definitely very different spaces. And there's things that the fine arts are very appealing to me in the sense that it's more instant, it's freer, it doesn't rely on that much money or that many financiers and producers and agents and things like that, but more like an instant thing to try things out and maybe do short films, and so yeah, both things. But definitely a next film is what I'm working on right now too.
Great.
Wow, I can't wait. Yeah, and it's impressive what you're all working on. So yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up, and then as a bonus there will be a proper version of the trailer.
Okay.
So now it's time for the thank yous and the bye-byes. Amalia, it was so wonderful having you 2 weeks in a row. I wish we could continue a weekly series with you, but I'm sure we'll have you back one day, since you're doing so many interesting things. So and keep us updated about the premiere of the movie. I can't wait. And João, thank you so much for being with us here as well, all the way from Finland. And good luck with everything. And yeah, we're working on already the next cultural matter, but that's still a secret, like Amalia's premiere location. So we'll leave it with some secrets. Hope to see everyone back soon. Stay tuned, and I'm now gonna share the trailer with you for the proper ending. Okay, thanks so much. See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
How do you like Huisman?
I don't know. It's always raining.
Yeah, it's not very nice.
No luck, no faith, no luck, no faith, no fate.
Un filtro para fotos. Pero sácame guapa, ¿eh?
No luck, no faith, no fate.
Bórrame todo lo malo que tenga. Quítame arrugas, manchas, todo.
Señora.
No luck, no faith, no fate.
¿Qué haces aquí?
Mucho frío, mami.
No luck, no faith, no fate.
¿Cuánto nos queda?
No luck, no faith, no fate.
¿Quién es?
No luck, no faith, no fate. Just me.
Can I add you?
Te estás preocupando por el pelo, nada más que por el pelo.
Hizo que miraba el móvil ahí para que le diera tiempo a subirse los pantalones.
Can you please turn your video up?
No gastes luz.
Sorry?
No, my mom. Dinner is ready.